Welcome to Magic Beyond the Books. I'm Renee, and today I am talking about the scene where Lee Jordan starts a podcast. Warning, there are Harry Potter spoilers from all the books in this episode. Identifying this scene, this is from Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, which is book 7, the final in the series. It's chapter 22, also called the Deathly Hallows. And the page numbers are 438 to 444, or if you're listening to the audiobook, it's about 25 minutes into chapter 22 to basically the end of the chapter. So I'm not going to talk too much about the beginning of the chapter, but I'm specifically talking about the radio show. Quick summary. During the Second Wizarding War, Lee Jordan hosts a radio show for the Resistance fighting against Voldemort's regime. The show, called Potterwatch, is heard by the trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, while they hunt for Horcruxes. But before we get into the episode, I'm going to talk about a new segment, Harry Potter Meme of the Week. For today's Harry Potter Meme of the Week, I'm going to be talking about a meme that I found that's recaps for all the Harry Potter books. And I think these are hilarious, but I'm going to try to get through them without laughing, so bear with me. But for book 1, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Harry violently kills turban-wearing man. Book 2, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Harry kills friend's sister's snake using sword and destroys her diary in front of her. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, book 3, Harry helps convicted mass murderer escape. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, book 4, Harry wins dangerous sports competition after his closest competitor dies mysteriously. Harry Potter 5, The Order of the Phoenix, Harry raids government facility after inciting gang warfare in school. Book 6, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Harry bullies fellow student until student instigates a school shooting. And finally, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, book 7. While on the run from the law, Harry and his gang commit numerous crimes, including theft, murder, bank robbery, and animal cruelty. Harry settles his gang war once and for all by killing the rival leader, then settles down and marries his best friend's sister. So that concludes our Harry Potter meme of the week. Let's get into the episode. So this scene is going to be all about Lee Jordan's radio show when the trio gets to listen to it. So I'm going to start with some radio show facts. Firstly, it's called Potterwatch, aptly named for Harry Potter. It's a weekly radio show, and the purpose was to provide information to the wizarding community since other sources were under the influence and control of Voldemort. And also, the show was a good way to boost morale for the anti-Voldemort movement. Other sources of news would include the Wizarding Wireless Network and the Daily Prophet, which are not exactly giving true accounts of what's going on in the world because they're heavily influenced by the Death Eaters. This radio show gets recorded in different locations every week to avoid being discovered by the Death Eaters. And there's a password to listen. Usually the password has something to do with the Order of the Phoenix, like Albus or Mad Eye. Bill Weasley is supposed to be really good at guessing the passwords, whereas Ron really struggles with coming up with the right password. And each week they give the password for the following week. But obviously if you miss a week, then you don't get the password. So you kind of have to guess your way back in. The show is hosted by Lee Jordan with regular correspondents Kingsley Shacklebolt and Remus Lupin. And then there's some other correspondents that come in as well. There are code names for everyone that talks on the podcast, radio show, whatever you want to call it, because they want to avoid being caught, even though you can tell by the sound of their voice if you know them who it is. So first, obviously the host is Lee Jordan. His code name is River. River is a reference to Lee's last name is Jordan, so that's the Jordan River, but also his first name is, there's River Lee in Ireland, so he's basically named after two rivers. Or I saw online some people suspect that River might be referencing that he's a river of information. Next, we have Royal, who is Kingsley. Of course, King in Kingsley is a reference to royalty. And also, at the time, Kingsley in the book 7 gets assigned to protect the prime minister. So he's kind of related, referenced to royalty, I guess, in that way. Next, we have Remus Lupin, whose codename is Romulus. So in Roman mythology, if you're not aware, there's these twin brothers. They're the sons of the god of Mars and a Vestal virgin, and they get abandoned as infants and saved by a she-wolf, Lupa. And the twins are named Romulus and Remus, and they grow up, and Romulus ends up killing Remus when they have a disagreement, and Romulus is the one that establishes Rome and becomes Rome's first king. Then we have Fred Weasley, who comes on. He's introduced as Rodent, but then he interrupts and says that he was going to be Rapier. So Rodent is probably a reference to Weasel and Weasley, but Rapier, which is Fred's preferred code name, that is probably a reference to one meaning, which is it being a reference to being quick and incisive, specifically about intelligence or speech. So, like a way that might be used in a sentence is describing someone having rapier wit, which makes a lot of sense for Fred. Also, rapier is a long, thin, sharp pointed type of sword that's usually used for thrusting. So, it could be a reference to that. That sword, I think, is supposed to be commonly carried by noblemen, so there might be something there. Aside from the people that talk on the radio show, they also talk a lot about Voldemort and Harry. And because Voldemort has this taboo on his name and they can't say Voldemort, they call him the Chief Death Eater. Harry, they typically call him Potter or Harry, but he's also referred to as the man with a lightning scar. So let's get into the timeline of this scene. Ron is continually trying to guess the passwords to try to listen to this radio show and show it to Hermione and Harry because he's been talking to them about it for weeks. But he finally gets the password when it's in March. So this is March 1998 is when he finally guesses the right password so we can hear the radio show again. And the password was Albus. But before we get too far into the scene, I did want to share a little pop culture update from March 1998 in the Muggle world. So here are a couple of things that were happening in the real world at the same time that they're finally listening to this radio show in the Harry Potter world. So one, the movie Titanic won 11 Oscars, and that is the most Oscars won by any movie. Titanic is tied for that achievement with 2 other movies. Can you guess what those other movies are? I'll give you 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, the other movies that also have won 11 Oscars are Ben-Hur. That was the first movie to do it. And then also The Lord of the Rings Return of the King, which is the third Lord of the Rings movie. Those 3 movies are the only movies that have won 11 Oscars and share the tie for first place. And they achieved those awards. Ben-Hur was the first, and then Titanic was second in 1998, and then Lord of the Rings after that. Titanic was nominated for 14 Oscars and won 11 of the 14. They also hold the record for the most number of nominations. Ben-Hur won 11 out of 12 nominations. And then finally, Lord of the Rings was the only one that's had a full sweep, winning all of its nominations. It was nominated for 11 Oscars and won all 11. Also during this time, the Big Lebowski movie was released, and that's become a cult classic. And Will Smith's Getting Jiggy With It was a hit song, which is so funny because I feel like we use that in this podcast a lot. So that was a 1998 popular song, along with My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion, which makes sense because that was from the Titanic soundtrack. During this time, March 1998, rapper Eminem was signed by Dr. Dre. He signed to Aftermath Entertainment, and there was a lot of buzz around Eminem after the 1997 Rap Olympics. So that's just crazy to think of this all happening in 1998. Like, I don't know, like Eminem not being as established as he is now. Lastly, last pop culture update I have for you is in March 1998 in the Georgia Dome in Atlanta, the Chicago Bulls played the Atlanta Hawks, and this game had the largest attendance in NBA history at the time. There have been a couple games that have had more attendance than this, but at the time, this was the record. It was 62,046 spectators. And this was during that time when like Michael Jordan and Dennis Rodman were playing for the Bulls and starting. So makes sense. And Michael Jordan was putting up like 1,000,000 points every game. So people wanted to see him. So it makes sense. But that's my little pop culture update of what was going on in the world while this is happening in Harry Potter. I know I've gotten some listeners say that they like those segments. So if you like that, I'll do that more. But let's get back into the timeline of this scene. So Harry, Ron, and Hermione get tuned into the show, and the show starts with Lee explaining that the radio show has taken a break from broadcasting recently because Death Eaters were in their area and they had to find a new secure location. This is a little like offhanded comment that he makes in the beginning. I wonder if they were broadcasting from the Burrow or somewhere around that area, like maybe from the Weasley's great aunt's house or something, because this is right after the time when Xenophilius is visited by the trio and then he gets arrested by Death Eaters. So Death Eaters are in that area. So that leads me to believe that maybe they were broadcasting from the Burrow. I'm not sure if this is confirmed anywhere, but it's just my little theory. And also, I just want to say that Lee Jordan, I'll just say it off the top, he's my hero of the scene for just creating this radio show. It was such a great idea for communicating out to the people that are on the run and aren't getting news, especially for the trio. They've kind of been disconnected from the Wizarding World. So hearing this radio show and getting updates makes them feel really connected. And it's so sweet. So I just love Lee Jordan for this. It really tracks for his character with him having previously announced for the Quidditch games. It seems like he's got the voice talent for doing something like this. So the show goes into death reports and then a moment of silence for the people that have passed recently. The deaths reported are Ted Tonks, Dirk Cresswell, Gornuk the Goblin, a Muggle family of 5 that live in Gadley, and then Bathilda Bagshot. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those people just to remind you if you haven't read the series in a while. Ted Tonks is Nymphadora Tonks' father and Andromeda Black's husband. Harry meets him when he crash lands at his house in the beginning of book 7. If you're just a movie watcher, you're not going to be familiar with Ted Tonks because they just go straight to the Burrow. But in the books, he goes to the Tonks residence before he goes to the Burrow. Then you have Dirk Cresswell. He is a Muggle-born wizard and head of the Goblin Liaison Office. He gets mentioned earlier by Professor Slughorn because he was in the Slug Club and keeps Professor Slughorn up to date on all the goings-on in Gringotts. Then you have Gornuk the Goblin. He's probably one of the people we know the least about. He is a goblin who worked at Gringotts but rebelled and left when the Death Eaters took over because he didn't want to work for wizards. Then the Muggle family of 5, we're not sure, like we don't really have too much information on them. And then there's Bathilda Bagshot. She is the author of A History of Magic book, which they read at Hogwarts, and Hermione is a big reader of. She's also a resident of Godric's Hollow, a neighbor to the Dumbledores and the Potters. And her corpse was being used as a vessel for Nagini when Harry and Hermione do their little visit to Godric's Hollow. So, of course, they already knew that she had passed. Then the radio goes into some missing reports. So Dean Thomas and another goblin that were traveling with Ted, Dirk, and Gornuk, they're missing. And Dean Thomas, of course, is the best friend of Seamus Finnegan. He's a Gryffindor in the same year and dorm as Harry. And then the other goblin ends up being Griphook. The trio runs into him later at Malfoy Manor and at Shell Cottage. Griphook was the goblin who took Harry to his vault when he first went to Diagon Alley when he was 11. So those are the people that are on the run, not confirmed dead at this point. So after that report from Lee, aka River, then he goes to Royal, aka Kingsley, with a Muggle World report. So Kingsley updates them saying that muggles remain unaware of Voldemort's takeover. Though there are heavy muggle casualties going on, there's lots of stories of wizards and witches helping the muggles, risking their own safety to protect them secretly without their knowledge. And Kingsley asks listeners to protect the muggles around them, casting protection spells against, like, over their houses, for their neighbors, that kind of thing. And Lee, aka River, asked Kingsley for his response to those that claim that they should focus on protecting wizards first. And this is my favorite quote from the scene from Kingsley. It's his response. He says, "It's one short step from wizards first to purebloods first, and then to Death Eaters. We're all human, aren't we? Every human life is worth the same and worth saving." And Lee says that Kingsley's got his vote for the next Minister of Magic, which is funny because that does come true. We know that Kingsley becomes the Minister of Magic when Voldemort falls. So after Kingsley's report, then they go to Romulus, aka Lupin, for the Pals of Potter report. Lupin maintains that Harry Potter is still alive. At this point, he hasn't had contact with Harry for months and months, but he says there's no doubt in his mind that Harry is still alive. He thinks that the Death Eaters would broadcast it if Harry was killed. And Remus says that Harry is a symbol of everything for which they are fighting: the triumph of good, the power of innocence, and the need to keep resisting. And Harry's really touched by this. He feels some guilt and shame for their fight that they had earlier. Movie watchers, you won't be aware of this, but Lupin and Harry have a run-in at Grimmauld Place, and Harry kind of like yells at Lupin for ditching Tonks and says that he needs to stick by his child because Lupin's trying to go on the Horcrux hunt with the trio. But Lupin definitely feels differently after the fight, and Lee asks if Lupin has a message for Harry, if he is listening, and Lupin's message is, "We're all with him in spirit," and then he adds, "to follow his instincts, which are good and nearly always right." And this makes Hermione cry, and Harry's touched by this. And Ron reports to the other two that Lupin and Tonks are living together, and Lupin and Tonks's baby is, growing in her stomach. Tonks is getting larger. She's probably like in her third trimester or something at this point. So he talks about how outspoken Harry Potter supporters are being imprisoned, including Xenophilius, which the trio already knew about because they were there. And they're just happy to know that he wasn't killed. And then Hagrid hosted a support Harry Potter party in his house and is now on the run, but not captured. And Lupin warns people to continue to support Harry, but maybe not host those types of parties because that would put them in danger from the Death Eaters. Then the radio show goes to quote unquote Chief Death Eater news, which is about Voldemort. And their new correspondent is quote unquote Rodent, is what Lee calls him, but Fred interrupts and says that he wants to be Rapier. And Fred reports that Voldemort is remaining in the shadows. There's lots of reports of sightings, and there's a lot of mystery around him, and he's not actually showing himself, which is causing a lot of crazy rumors to go around. One rumor is that he can kill with one look. And so Fred dispels this, saying that Voldemort isn't the basilisk. He can't kill with one look, but even if you do run into him, you're probably going to die anyway. So, and then Fred talks about the rumors that Voldemort is abroad and just warns listeners, don't be lulled into a false sense of security. If he is or isn't abroad, that doesn't mean you're just safe because he could still get back to England. And he just warns listeners to be careful. And the show ends and the trio feels just better and more connected. And, they all seem very happy after hearing some of their loved ones and hearing that other people are resisting, because they've kind of been in this like vacuum where they're not really hearing about the outside world. They're off on the run. They're doing their own thing. They don't really know about what's been going on with everyone else. So it's just nice for them to hear this little update. Now, I know this is technically a radio show and I'm calling it a podcast, but I thought this would be a good time to talk about this podcast and give a little behind the scenes. This is our 50th episode, 50, which is crazy. So I'm so excited to be celebrating 50 episodes. I've been doing this for almost a year now and planning to continue. So I hope you still listen. But since we're talking about these podcasts, I thought I'd talk a little bit about this podcast. So this podcast is self-produced and hosted. I do the recording, sound mixing, editing, researching, and preparing for the episodes and social media. And in case anyone is interested in doing a podcast, I listened to a lot of podcasts before I started my own, and I'm not going to gatekeep anything. So the equipment that I use a Shure microphone, Shure, and I use a Rode mic stand. And then the headphones that I use are Audio Technica. It's called ATH M50X headphones. And then I use my laptop. So that's really the physical equipment that I use, the hardware to podcast. You probably don't need all of that. You could probably record with a cheaper microphone and not use the stand and whatnot. But that's just what I use for your reference in case you're interested in starting one. The software that I personally use Riverside. It's riverside.fm. I use that for recording and editing of all the episodes. And then I use transistor.fm as my hosting platform. And that's also how I have a website, is through Transistor. And then when you have a podcast, you get something called an RSS feed, and you host it on a platform, and then you get this feed, and then that feed gets synced to all the platforms where people listen to podcasts. So from Transistor through them, that's how this podcast gets posted to Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening right now. So those are really the software that I use. And then I just use, Instagram and TikTok for the social media side of things, for note taking and, saving pictures and sorting all my files. I just use Google, and I use Google Drive with Google Sheets and Google Docs and things. And I share that with my guest hosts. So nothing too special there. And if you want to do a podcast, I would say just do it. The most expensive part is definitely the equipment, but you can probably get by with cheaper. It is a lot more work than you think. It's not just the recording time, editing takes time. And depending on what kind of podcast you're planning to do, this one takes a lot of research and prep before every episode. So I spent a lot of time putting together my notes before each week. So it's definitely multiple hours every week working on this, and, planning and coordinating with guest hosts and doing the social media. So it just takes a lot of time. And something that I found on the backside of this is other creators tend to be very friendly, and a lot of people respond to direct messages on social media. I've been able to connect with a lot of people that way and talk to other Harry Potter creators, whether it's other podcasters, or even I've spoken with people from the baking show that were on that. So and people who have done Harry Potter related plays. So I've really gotten connected with a lot of people just through social media and direct messaging. So I found that people are very friendly and open that way. I guess that's my weird way of saying, yes, you can talk to strangers, kind of. But yeah, there's that. And then I'll talk a little bit about the podcast itself. So the first episode was released on February 6th, 2025. Like I said, almost a full year ago. And our most popular episodes, so our top 5, number 1 is the first release episode, which makes sense. A lot of people I know start from the beginning. That episode is A Day in the Life of Vernon Dursley. Our second most popular is also the second episode, Professor Quirinus Quirrell. And then it kind of goes around. So the third most popular is Bill and Fleur's Wedding. That's episode 14. And then Ghost Party, that is about the Chamber of Secrets book scene from book 2. That's the birthday party, or it's not the birthday party, the death day party for Nicholas, Sir Nicholas, the Gryffindor ghost. So Ghost Party is number 4, and that's episode 3. And then tie for 5th place as far as popular episodes, most listened to episodes. Tie for 5th place, we have Oliver Wood, episode 13, Harry Potter Couples, which is episode 20, and then Wizarding World at Epic Universe, number 22. So let me know if any of those are your favorite episode. I've heard a lot of different things about people's favorite. Which one do you like the best? What was your favorite? Where did you start? Did you start at the beginning or have you been jumping around? Let me know. Top listener countries for this podcast. So United States is our top country, followed by Germany, Canada, United Kingdom, and Russia. So thank you for everyone listening in those countries. And then within the United States, since that's our most popular country, our top 5 states are Florida, Washington, Texas, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. So a lot all over the place for United States. And I've got, I think, most states covered. So write in, tell me where you're listening from. I'd really love to know. I want to see, where is our farthest listener? I'm podcasting from Florida in the United States. So where are you listening from? Are you listening from far away? And when do you listen? I'm very curious. These episodes are released at 6 a.m. Eastern time on Thursdays, but I know people don't always listen. Do people listen in the morning? Are you listening at night? Are you listening on your commute? Do you listen when you travel? Let me know. But that's really all. If you have any questions about this podcast, I'm happy to share. I'm definitely not an expert, but been doing it for almost a year now, which is crazy. So I'm not going to gatekeep anything because I was once, if you're looking to start a podcast, I was once like you and I just listened to podcasts and I wanted to start one. That's all for today's episode, though. So thank you for listening. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And next week, we will be discussing Lily Potter, Harry Potter's mom. Until then, happy reading, happy listening, and may you never be scratched by a boat truckle.